I never thought much about ladders until Marcus showed me what respect actually looks like. It was one of those sweltering August afternoons when the air conditioning in my new apartment decided to give up completely. I'd been living there for exactly 3 weeks, still had boxes stacked in corners, still didn't know my neighbors' names. The landlord said he'd send someone over to look at the AC unit, but you know how that goes. So there I was, standing in my living room in basketball shorts and a tank top that was already soaked through with sweat, staring up at this ceiling vent that was making a sound like a dying animal. My buddy Jake had left this rickety extension ladder in my storage unit when he moved to Portland, said I might need it someday. I'd rolled my eyes at the time, but now I was grateful. The thing was ancient, paint-splattered, with duct tape holding one of the middle rungs together, but it was tall enough to reach the vent, and that's all that mattered. I dragged it into the living room, positioned it under the vent, and gave it a shake. Seemed stable enough. I'd watched enough YouTube videos that morning to feel dangerously confident about what I was doing. How hard could it be, right? Just climb up, unscrew the cover, maybe spray some WD-40 on whatever was making that god-awful noise. I was 3 rungs up when I heard the knock on my door. For a second, I considered ignoring it. I was committed now, already climbing, already focused on the task. But the knock came again, more insistent this time, and I sighed and climbed back down. Probably a delivery I'd forgotten about. I opened the door to find this guy standing there, maybe late 20s, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it, wearing a faded blue work shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He had kind eyes. That's the first thing I noticed. Not handsome, not hot, just kind. The kind of eyes that actually see you. "Hey," he said, and his voice matched his eyes. Warm, easy. "I'm Marcus. I live in 304, right above you. I heard some dragging sounds and wanted to make sure everything was okay." I probably looked like a mess. Definitely smelled like one, but Marcus didn't seem to notice or care. "Oh yeah, sorry about the noise," I said. "My AC is having some kind of breakdown, and I'm trying to check the vent. Probably nothing, but the sound is driving me crazy." He glanced past me into the apartment, and I saw his eyes land on the ladder, positioned in the middle of my living room. "You're going up there alone?" he asked, and there was no judgment in his voice, just genuine concern. "Yeah, I mean, it's not that high. I've climbed ladders before." Marcus nodded slowly, then looked back at me. "Would you mind if I held the ladder for you? I know that sounds weird. We just met. But those extension ladders can be tricky. Had a buddy in college who fell off one and broke his wrist. Just, for safety." I hesitated. I'd been living in the city for 2 years now, and I'd learned to be cautious about letting people into my space, into my life. But something about Marcus felt different. Maybe it was the heat making me delirious. Maybe it was the fact that he'd climbed a flight of stairs just to check on a neighbor he'd never met. Maybe it was those kind eyes. "Sure," I said, stepping back to let him in. "I appreciate it." He followed me inside, and I suddenly became hyper-aware of the state of my apartment. The boxes, the dishes in the sink, the laundry I'd meant to fold 3 days ago still sitting in the basket by the couch. "Sorry about the mess," I said, still settling in. "Don't worry about it," Marcus said. "You should have seen my place when I first moved in. Took me 2 months to unpack everything." I grabbed a screwdriver from my pathetic excuse for a toolkit and headed back to the ladder. Marcus positioned himself at the base, both hands on the rails, feet planted wide. "Okay," he said. "Take your time going up. I've got you." I started climbing, and immediately I felt the difference. With Marcus holding the base, the ladder didn't wobble or shift. It felt solid, secure. I climbed higher, focused on the vent above me, and that's when I felt it. Or rather, didn't feel it. See, I've had guys help me with stuff before. Hold ladders, spot me at the gym, assist with moving furniture. And there's always this moment, this split second, where their hands end up somewhere they don't need to be, a touch on the lower back that lingers too long, fingers on the thigh disguised as steadying. That casual invasion of space that they pretend is accidental, but Marcus, his hands stayed exactly where they needed to be, on the ladder, not on me. I reached the vent and started unscrewing the cover, hyper-aware now of this absence of touch that felt more significant than any touch I'd experienced before. This man, this stranger, was close enough to reach me, helping me, supporting me, and he was respecting my space completely. "How's it looking up there?" Marcus called up. "Honestly, I have no idea what I'm looking at," I admitted. "There's a lot of dust and some kind of mechanical thing that might be a fan." I heard him laugh, and it was a good laugh. Genuine. "Want me to take a look?" "I'm not an expert, but I've fixed a few AC issues in my place." "You sure?" "Yeah, we can switch. Just come down slowly." I descended the ladder, and we traded places. I moved to where Marcus had been standing, wrapped my hands around the rails like he had, and watched as he climbed up. He was taller than me, moved with more confidence on the ladder, and when he reached the vent, he peered inside with the kind of focus I recognized from my own work. "There's your problem," he said after a moment. "The fan blade is hitting something. Looks like a piece of debris got stuck in there. You got any needle nose pliers?" I did not have needle nose pliers. I barely had regular pliers. "I'll grab mine," Marcus said, climbing back down. "Be right back." He disappeared out the door, and I stood there in my living room, still holding the ladder even though no one was on it anymore, processing what had just happened. This man had entered my home, helped me without asking for anything, respected my boundaries without me having to enforce them, and was now coming back with tools to actually fix my problem. It felt foreign. It felt strange. It felt like something I didn't know I'd been waiting for. Marcus returned with a small toolkit, the kind that actually looked used and cared for, not like the cheap set I'd bought at a big box store and never opened. He climbed back up, and I resumed my position at the base of the ladder, hands on the rails, feeling the slight shifts and movements as he worked above me. "Got it," he said after a few minutes. "Some kind of plastic wrapper got sucked up in here. Let me just make sure nothing else is blocking it." I watched him work, watched the careful way he handled the tools, the patience in his movements. He wasn't rushing, wasn't performing, wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just fixing a problem because he could, because it was the right thing to do. "Okay," he said finally. "Try turning it on now." I left my post at the ladder and went to the thermostat, flipped the AC back on. For a moment, nothing. Then a click, a whir, and blessed cool air started flowing from the vents. No horrible grinding noise, just the normal, beautiful sound of working air conditioning. "You're a lifesaver," I said, and I meant it. Marcus climbed down, wiped his hands on his jeans. "Happy to help. Welcome to the building, by the way. Should have said that first." We stood there for a moment, and I realized I didn't want him to leave yet. This person who'd shown me casual kindness without expecting anything in return. This person who'd held a ladder steady without making it weird. "Can I offer you a beer?" I asked. "Or water? I don't have much, but it's the least I can do." Marcus smiled, and I noticed the way it crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Beer sounds great, actually." We ended up sitting on my balcony, which was barely big enough for 2 folding chairs, but had a decent view of the street below. The beer was cheap, the kind you buy in bulk because it's on sale, but Marcus didn't seem to mind. We talked about the building, about the neighborhood, about the taco place on the corner that he swore by and I hadn't tried yet. "So what brought you to the building?" Marcus asked. "New job," I said. "Marketing firm downtown. Needed a place closer to the office, and this was what I could afford." "You like it, the job?" I took a sip of my beer, considered the question. "I'm good at it. Whether I like it is a different conversation." Marcus nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. I get that. I'm a teacher, middle school English. Some days I love it, some days I wonder what I was thinking. Middle school, I said. That's brave. That's one word for it. He laughed. But they're good kids, just trying to figure out who they are, you know. I remember being that age, everything feeling so intense and confusing. If I can make it even slightly less terrible for them, that feels worth it. There was something about the way he talked about his students, this genuine care and respect, that made me see him differently. This wasn't just a nice guy who helped with ladders. This was someone who'd chosen a hard job because he wanted to make a difference. We finished our beers, and Marcus stood to leave. I walked him to the door, suddenly not wanting this interaction to end. Thanks again, I said, for the ladder, for the AC, for the company. Any time, Marcus said, and then he paused, like he was deciding whether to say something. Hey, if you ever need anything, I'm just upstairs, and I mean that. Not in a weird way, just in a neighbor way. I appreciate that, I said, and I did. After he left, I cleaned up the beer bottles, put away the ladder, and stood in my newly air-conditioned apartment, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. Seen. Respected. It's wild how something so simple can shift your entire perspective. Marcus held a ladder steady. That's it. That's all he did. But in doing it without making it about him, without using it as an excuse to invade my space, without expecting anything in return, he showed me what actual respect looks like. I'd been in relationships where guys said they respected me but didn't show it, where boundaries were something to negotiate rather than honor, where every act of kindness came with an invisible price tag attached. But Marcus held a ladder steady, didn't have to touch my leg to do it, didn't have to make it weird or uncomfortable or transactional. He just helped because he could, because it was the decent thing to do, and then he left without expecting applause or reciprocation. Over the next few weeks, I kept running into Marcus in the building, at the mailboxes, in the lobby, once at the grocery store on the corner. Each time he'd smile and ask how the AC was holding up, how I was settling in, if I'd tried that taco place yet. And each time I felt that same sense of safety, that same respect for boundaries. We started having coffee sometimes on Sunday mornings when neither of us had anywhere to be. He'd come down to my place or I'd go up to his, and we'd sit and talk about nothing important. Books he was teaching, campaigns I was working on, the weird sounds the building made at night, whether the pizza place that just opened was worth trying. It was easy with Marcus, uncomplicated. There was no game playing, no trying to figure out hidden meanings in text messages, no wondering if he was interested or just being friendly. He was just present, genuinely interested in knowing me as a person, not as a conquest or a project. One Saturday afternoon, about 2 months after we'd met, I was attempting to hang some shelves in my bedroom. I'd measured everything twice, had the level out, was feeling pretty confident about my abilities. I'd just gotten the first bracket into the wall when I heard a knock. Marcus, of course, holding 2 coffees from the place down the street. Heard drilling, he said. Thought you might need a second set of hands, or at least caffeine. I laughed and let him in. How do you always know when I'm doing something potentially dangerous? Thin walls, he said, and I recognized the sound of ambitious DIY projects. We hung the shelves together, Marcus holding the level while I drilled, both of us laughing when we realized I'd measured in the wrong spot and had to start over. He didn't make me feel stupid about it, didn't take over the project, just helped me fix it and move forward. When we finished, the shelves were actually level, actually secure, and I felt this surge of pride that I'd done something right with my space. They look good, Marcus said, standing back to admire our work. We make a good team, I replied, and then immediately wondered if that sounded too forward, too presumptuous. But Marcus just smiled. Yeah, we do. We were standing close, both looking at the shelves, and I became aware of the space between us. Small enough to close, large enough to respect. And Marcus didn't close it. He stayed where he was, present but not invasive, there but not imposing. Can I ask you something? I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. Sure. Why did you knock on my door that first day, with the ladder? You didn't know me. I could have been anyone. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and I watched him consider the question seriously. Honestly, I heard the ladder being dragged across the floor, and I thought about my buddy who fell. And I thought about how, if I heard someone fall, I'd feel terrible for not checking. So I checked. That simple? That simple. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his expression I couldn't quite name. But I'm glad I did. Check, I mean. Me too, I said quietly. Something shifted between us in that moment. Not dramatically, not obviously, but like a subtle change in air pressure before a storm. We were still just neighbors, still just friends, but there was an acknowledgement now of something more, something possible. Marcus left after we cleaned up the drill bits and packaging, and I sat on my bed looking at the new shelves, thinking about ladders and boundaries and the difference between wanting someone and respecting them. I'd been attracted to Marcus from the beginning, if I was honest with myself, but it wasn't just physical attraction. It was the way he moved through the world with intention and kindness, the way he helped without expecting praise, the way he respected space and boundaries like they were sacred things. That night, I lay in bed and thought about every interaction we'd had. The ladder, the coffee, the shelves, the conversations on my balcony. And I realized that Marcus had been showing me consistently and clearly what healthy masculinity looked like, what respect looked like, what genuine care looked like, without possession or expectation attached. He'd never once made me uncomfortable, never pushed for more than I was offering, never used his proximity or his helpfulness as leverage. He just existed in my life as this steady, kind presence who made everything feel a little bit safer, a little bit easier. The next Sunday, I knocked on his door with coffee and pastries from the bakery I'd discovered on my morning run. Marcus answered in sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, hair messy from sleep, looking adorably rumpled. "Is this a bad time?" I asked. "No, this is perfect," he said, stepping back to let me in. I was just grading essays and slowly losing my will to live. His apartment was similar to mine in layout, but completely different in feel. Where mine was still half unpacked and chaotic, his was lived in and cozy. Books everywhere, plants on the windowsills, art on the walls that looked like it actually meant something to him. It felt like a home, not just a place to sleep. We sat at his kitchen table, eating pastries and talking about his students' essays. And I watched the way his face lit up when he talked about a kid who'd finally had a breakthrough with a writing assignment. The genuine joy he took in other people's success. "Can I tell you something?" I said, interrupting a story about a student's creative interpretation of Romeo and Juliet. "Of course." I took a breath, chose my words carefully. "That first day when you held the ladder for me, you did something I didn't know I needed. You helped me without making it about you. You respected my space without me having to ask, and that's never happened to me before." Marcus set down his coffee, gave me his full attention. "Every other guy I've known," I continued, "there's always been this moment where they expect something in return for basic decency, like kindness is currency and I owe them something, but you've never done that. You just help because you can, because it's right, and you don't expect anything back." "That's just being a decent human," Marcus said softly. "No," I said, "it's not. I wish it was, but it's not. And I wanted you to know that I see it. I see you, and I'm grateful." We sat in the quiet of his kitchen, morning light streaming through the windows. and I felt vulnerable in a way I hadn't let myself feel in years. Exposed, open, but safe, somehow, in that vulnerability. "I like you," Marcus said finally, and the words were simple, but they landed with weight. "I've liked you since that first day, but I didn't want to make things weird. You're my neighbor, you're becoming my friend, and I didn't want to mess that up by pushing for something you might not want." My heart was doing something complicated in my chest. What if I do want it? "Then we should probably talk about what that means," Marcus said. And even now, even in this moment of confession and possibility, he was being thoughtful, careful, respectful. We talked for hours that morning about what we wanted, what we were afraid of, what boundaries we needed. Marcus listened when I told him about past relationships that had left me wary, about the ways I'd been hurt by people who claimed to care. He shared his own history, his own fears, his own commitment to doing better than what he'd seen modeled around him. "I don't want to rush this," he said. "Whatever this is, I want to do it right." "What does right look like?" I asked. "Honest, patient, respectful." He reached across the table, and I met him halfway, our hands touching in the middle. "I want to be someone you can trust, not just with the big things, but with the small things too, the everyday things." His hand was warm, solid, real, and I realized that this was what I'd been looking for all along. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but this quiet commitment to showing up, to respecting boundaries, to holding the ladder steady without needing to make it about anything else. We started dating after that, though dating feels like too simple a word for what we built together. It was slow and intentional and sometimes frustratingly careful, but it was also the healthiest thing I'd ever been part of. Marcus continued to show me every single day what respect looked like in action. When I had a bad day at work, he listened without trying to fix it. When I needed space, he gave it without making me feel guilty. When I was ready to be closer, he met me there with the same careful attention he'd shown that first day with the ladder. We learned each other slowly. The way he took his coffee, the books that made him cry, the songs he played when he was grading papers, the way I got quiet when I was overwhelmed, the things that made me laugh, the dreams I was afraid to say out loud. And through it all, Marcus held steady, not controlling, not possessive, just present, just there, just consistently showing me that I was worth the patience, worth the respect, worth the careful attention. It's been 8 months now since that day with the ladder. 8 months of learning what healthy love looks like, what it feels like to be with someone who sees your boundaries, not as obstacles but as important information about how to care for you better. Last week, my lease came up for renewal, and Marcus and I talked about what we wanted to do, his apartment or mine, whether we were ready for that step. "I don't want to push," he said, because of course he did. "But I also don't want to pretend I don't want this, want us, want to fall asleep next to you and wake up next to you and hold the ladder steady for you for as long as you'll let me." I kissed him then, there in my apartment where this all started, and I thought about how far we'd come from that first day, how much I'd learned about what I deserved, what real respect looked like, what it meant to be with someone who valued my autonomy as much as my presence. We're moving into his place next month. The bigger apartment, the one with the better light and the plants and the books. We're taking it slow, keeping our own spaces within the shared space, figuring out how to build something together without losing ourselves in the process. And I know, with the kind of certainty I've never felt before, that Marcus will keep holding the ladder steady, that he'll keep respecting boundaries, that he'll keep showing up with intention and care and that quiet, powerful respect that changed everything for me. Because that's who he is. Not because I asked, not because I demanded it, but because he understands that love without respect isn't love at all. It's just possession dressed up in prettier words. He held the ladder steady for me. Didn't have to touch my leg to do it. And in that simple act of respectful help, he showed me what I'd been missing all along, what I deserved, what was possible when someone actually saw you as a whole person, worthy of care and boundaries and space. Sometimes the most profound changes in our lives come from the smallest moments. A knock on the door, a steadying hand on a ladder, a choice to respect rather than invade. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, those small moments grow into something beautiful and lasting and real. Marcus held the ladder steady, and in doing so, he taught me what it means to be truly seen, truly respected, truly valued, not for what I could give him, but for who I already was. That's the kind of love worth waiting for, the kind worth building slowly, the kind that starts with a ladder and grows into a life.